Libertarian Book Club. I'm on today with my friend Caleb. Caleb, how you doing?
I'm good, man. How are you?
Doing great, doing great. So today we're going to talk about Harrison Bergeron. But let's first see how this kind of started, how the podcast, how we met on Twitter kind of thing. You want to kind of elaborate a little bit on that or something?
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure how we exactly met. I know like maybe like 6 months ago I had like 90 followers on Twitter, and then I just trying to kind of started to get involved in like the Liberty Twitter sphere. And I've met a ton of really cool people that I interact with on like personal levels and like political levels. And you and I've had actually probably like 10 or 12 interactions on Twitter about like a variety of things. So I like really appreciate that kind of stuff. It's always a lot of fun to like meet people that you probably never would have met in real life. That's probably the best thing that Twitter's for.
Oh, yeah. That and memes.
Yeah,
Good
lots of
trolling.
things.
No, yeah, I would say, I think we had a conversation a while ago about Austrian versus Chicago economics
Yeah,
and what is the best way to advertise to people. It was a very fun conversation.
yeah. Twitter is weird because I think it attracts a lot of people to be like um, provocative and like rude, really. And I personally hate that. Like, I'll get into arguments with people on Twitter that I vehemently disagree with that are really mean to me, and I start almost every tweet off with like, "I really am sorry about us disagreeing." So like when I meet someone that I actually like know there's like a foundational agreement about stuff, I have way more fun because I feel like I can be like more honest and more open and less like polite kind of. So I think that's kind of a cool thing that we've experienced like discussing or debating like Chicago school or Austrian school economics.
Yeah, no, it's been a lot of fun. So we're going over Harrison Bergeron today. I'll put a link in the description if anybody wants to go and read it. It's a very good short story. Not too long. Very good. It's about, I would say it's a dystopian future made by a guy who's clearly an absurdist.
Yeah.
It's very funny, very, very interesting. I read it once, I read it twice, and I sat and read it again. It was very good. And
Yeah.
so, Caleb, if you want to kind of go over a little bit, your history of the story, and anything you want to talk about with it, just go right ahead.
Yeah, so my history with the short story is actually bizarre. A little bit of background about myself, actually. I graduated from Texas State University with a degree in English, and my emphasis was on creative writing, so I wanted to go into writing specifically short stories. And kind of one of my later classes I took in that program, I had American literature, and so this is not going to be really a shock to anyone ever, but higher education is full of people that think that like classical Marxism is like right wing. It's pretty dominated by left wing ideologues, and I took a class from like a self-proclaimed postmodernist and like third wave feminist who was born and raised in France, and she put this on the syllabus, this short story, Harrison Bergeron, and I read it, and I mean, like you, it's like 5 pages long, so it's easy to read like just back to back, and I kept thinking like, where's the Marxism? Where's the postmodernism? Because this is so blatantly like a dystopian, a left-wing dystopian world. And I was like kind of confused because I was like, I'm going to go into class tomorrow and I'm going to be talking about this passionately to probably a room full of people who, at the very least, the professor is going to be like, disagree with me. But like, you know, surprisingly enough, I go into the room and we had a really pretty cool conversation about the ideals of like enforced equality and like the damage that that does on the human soul. We haven't given any kind of summary. Would you want to just kind of recount what the 5 6 pages are about?
So, so it opens up, and there are these husband and wife couple. And the book describes it as everybody having weights on and devices around their heads and smarter. It's kind of a forced equality to the 211th, 12th, and 13th Amendment. I like the fact that they showed that it wasn't a radical tear down, build up. It was just a keep amending the Constitution. They created their own system. That was an interesting idea, I thought. Let's see what happens next. So next, watching dinner, watching TV, eating dinner, talking about how recently their son, Harrison Bergeron, was taken away by the government for being a revolutionary radical. What's another
About
interesting point?
14 years old, I believe, is when he
14.
was kidnapped.
14-year-old and already arrested by the government. What a lesson. Living the dream, man. But I don't want to spoil too much of it. I just kind of want to get a little overview of it. It's forced equality to the extreme. We're talking weighted clothes. We're talking if your brain works faster when you're smaller, you have a device around your head that will sound a noise every 20 seconds to prevent you from focusing. It's a really absurd version of forced equality, not by raising everybody up, but lowering everybody to the common standard.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to spoil it too much, because I think there's some cool parts that people will enjoy to read for themselves, but
Yeah.
it's definitely worth you. I mean, it's 5 pages for people. It's very easy to get into. You knock it out in about 5 minutes.
I agree, because I think that I simply talking about the fact that tall people wear weights to make them shorter, and smart people have like devices that slow down their like thinking. You don't actually have to talk much, or we don't have to talk much about the like climax or anything, because that concept itself is so like self-explanatory, and it invites conversation and like imagination just by itself to think about a world that's so absurd that you're not allowed. Like I think the most profound example of forced equality is like one of the ballerinas is too beautiful, so she wears like a mask to distort her face, and that reminds me actually. Recently, I've been going through and I reread Free to Choose by Milton Friedman, and I'm rewatching the accompanying PBS documentary.
Great series. It's on Amazon. If anyone wants to check it out, Amazon Video. Highly recommend it.
Amazon Video, and it's actually also on YouTube, so it's really easy to watch. And one thing that Milton Friedman talks about, and so it's worth noting that this short story was published in 1961. So this is obviously in the heat of the Cold War and the Cultural Revolution, and America is kind of slanting towards the left wing of the political spectrum. And so Harrison Bergeron talks about forced equality, and to go back to Milton Friedman, and one of the, I think, Created Equal is the name of the episode that I'm referring to. He talks about, well, not everyone's equal, obviously. Muhammad Ali, he's a great boxer, and one of the examples he uses, which is kind of funny, is he talks about I believe a model or an actress's legs, where he's like, well, we all enjoy Muhammad Ali's boxing, we all enjoy this actress's legs, does that mean that we're not equal? And Harrison Bergeron kind of expands on that ideological foundation to its most absurd end possible.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It was again, I was reading it, and all I could think of was like, this is someone from 1984 made it shorter and made it an absurd take. I think not only explain how absurd the idea of true perfect equality is, but the fact that the implementation of it would be ridiculous. I would say one of the quotes I quote from the book that I really enjoyed was the conversation between the wife and George. I didn't write down the wife's name, but between George and wife started saying, you could just take it off sometimes, you know, you just remove some beads from it to make it lighter. And then he goes to this whole part, like, if I get away with it, other people get away with it, right back in the dark ages immediately.
Yeah.
And it's just like, that's just how most people think about, like, any law or any system they have now. It's like, if not everyone follows it, we're back in the dark ages. Even if the law's weird, immediately got to respect everything. It's like, really something made me see the COVID lockdown policies.
Mm-hmm.
It was great.
Yeah, kind of on that thread, there's two moments, that one and then later on, where they talk about how all of these policies are enforced at gunpoint. Which that's what I think a lot of ideologues or utopian thinkers of the left wing misunderstand, and this is something that Hayek talks about in The Road to Serfdom, is in order to have a truly socialist society, you can't be a socialist to enact it. You can't be peaceful or egalitarian or pacifist to make everyone equal in any kind of capacity, because, I mean, this Harrison Bergeron, throughout the whole book, they're talking about really how things want to get back to normal. Like their brain doesn't cooperate. The society doesn't want to cooperate, and it's being enforced through a monopoly of violence and through gunpoint. And no matter how the intention of any kind of central planner or the government and Harrison Bergeron, you can do that with the intention of equality, which I don't think many people would say that at face value or at a dictionary's definition is a bad thing. In order to achieve it, you're actually going to do really heinous things and have to use force in the name of these good intentions that you have.
Absolutely. I would say that was one of the points I think that I think a lot of people need to understand that every time the law, remember there's a law, that means it's being enforced at a form of violence or gunpoint.
Mm-hmm.
I remember I was in a conversation with a conservative person on Twitter one time, and she was saying we need to make everything illegal, pretty much. I mean, she wanted to make contraception illegal, she wanted to make gay marriage legal, all of it again. Mm-hmm. I was like, are you okay as people taking guns to enforce your will? And she was like, what are you talking about guns? Who has guns in this scenario?
Yeah, well, people don't typically do someone else's bidding unless there's some threat of violence. People don't think about that.
Good ideas don't require force. It's like something very basic, but most people just don't want to grasp that. It's weird.
Yeah, and speaking like adjacent to that, one of the big themes of the short story is just completely pitting, and this is not uncommon in any literary capacity, but it's just nature versus technology and nature versus automation. There's really few examples of times that Vonnegut talks about anything natural, born, grown, and the times that he does, one exact specific example is he talks about when Harrison Bergeron rips all the weights off of him, he snaps it like a piece of celery. Or the woman, the Empress, and Harrison are dancing and they look like deer. But everything else that's associated with this, tyrannical authoritarian government is radios and it's technology. It's not natural. And it's really kind of cliche at this point to talk about nature versus technology, but I think that when you read a lot of more popular socialist or left-wing literature, they make it seem like, well, what's actually natural is cooperation and communal living, and they have this idea of the hunter-gatherer society where it's natural to not, have individualism or property rights or something. And Vonnegut just completely flips that around.
Yeah, that was a nice thing, but I never really noticed it people pointing it out, but you're absolutely right. It is very much a natural order versus unnatural order kind of thing. Using nature as a metaphor. It's very... That's a good thing you point out, because now you said I see that when I think about the story, and but did you ever watch the short film they made of Harrison Bergeron on YouTube?
No, actually I haven't.
It's very good. I watched it this morning because I was wanting to get more information on the story, and I watched the short story. It's like a 30-minute video, easy to knock out. Really good movie. They got good actors, good budget. I highly recommend anybody who's interested in the story after they read it, because you should always read the story before the movie. Read the story, watch the movie, really puts it on a visual perspective. They only changed one thing, and it was the ending.
Oh wow!
But it's definitely. I'll send you a link after. It reminds me, link. I wanted to. We think this is an absurdist saying. They did a true equality is a crazy saying. I'm going to send you a photo on Twitter. I'm going to put this in the actual video. But we think of absurdism, the true idea of public equality really is absurdism. And then we see photos like the one I sent you and the one that's going to be on the screen. Did you get it yet?
No, I haven't. Okay, here it is. Okay, yeah, actually I've seen this before. Yeah. It's everyone in the room is the same height because they are wearing stilts to be as tall as the tallest person.
Exactly. It's a height equality. It's like this book was written. This story was written to be absurd, and then here we are actually seeing it happen almost. Just putting on stilts to make everybody the same height. Yeah. But in this case, they're raising people instead of lowering people, which is a little different, but still, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, but even in this picture, you can think that the most heavily discriminated against person in that room would be the shortest person, And it's like people aren't the same. That's actually like a incredibly useful and good quality of human beings. Is like we're very different, and our diversity is really what's like, created prosperity in a lot of ways.
Absolutely, absolutely. So the author, you seem to know a little bit about him. What was his name again? I didn't write it down.
Kurt Vonnegut. I know about some of his work, but this is actually the only thing that I've personally read of his before. But in that class that I took, I read a little bit about his bibliography, and but again, that was like 4 years ago, so I don't remember too much about it.
Understandable, understandable. I had a question I wanted to ask you about the book. If you had to guess, what would be the 200th amendment out of the 225 they made?
Oh man, that's actually a really good question. So I'm going to pretend in my head that it's like, so the first line of the story, it says the year was 2081. So that's 120 years after the story was published, and kind of crazy to think that it is quite literally 60 years away from like this year. So we're halfway there. And in the time, from then to now, or from then to 2081, some 200 odd amendments have been passed. And I thought, I was like, I wonder when they like abolished private property, or I wonder when they, passed an amendment that like owning a Dr. Seuss book was punishable by death. Like, you can think at a certain point, like if they're just passing amendments like that, there's absolutely no checks and balances in the Congress, and like, man, that's a good question.
There's got to be some really absurd ones along the way, you think?
Yeah, because you got to think that they probably passed an amendment saying that, well, physically speaking, you can never do a job that someone else couldn't do. Like, because you have to think that all of these absurdist rules about equality and bodily autonomy, it started probably small. So like they probably said like, oh well, we all have to be the same height, and then we all have to be able to lift the same amount, kind of thing.
Absolutely. I want to point out that later in the story there was the instance where the announcer or the show couldn't even speak. He had a speech and he stutter. And Hazel, the name of the wife, he tried. That's the big thing. He tried to do the best he could. It's what God gave him. He's to get a nice way for trying so hard. It's just like, I wish that's how I work, honestly. I would love to get a raise just for trying.
Oh yeah, well that's really, if you boil down the themes of the story, it's like our intention is to make everyone equal. And I think to like an untrained ear, someone that hasn't, watched 10 hours of Milton Friedman's documentary, you'd say, oh man, that's an awesome idea. But one example I heard is, I don't know if you have any siblings or not, but my sister and I, when we were kids, and let's say we had, one thing, like we wanted to both play with whatever. If we're arguing about it, our mom doesn't say, well, we'll get y'all both one. She says, no, neither of y'all get to have it, and she takes it away. That's equality. That's actual equality. None of us have it. That's kind of the goal with what like capital or wealth or property is. Well, we're not giving everybody enough to be Elon Musk. We're taking away from everyone to be, dependent or just in poverty.
Exactly. One of the things I really enjoyed about the book was when you first hear Harrison Bergeron wanting to overthrow the government. I'm like, oh, cool. He's like a hero. He's a free thinker. He's an independent. And he gets on stage. He's like, no, I am the best. I am great. Everyone now worships me. I'm the greatest man alive. It's well, like, that's a...
Go ahead.
One second. Go ahead. What was that?
Well, I was going to say, there's a lot of interesting things going on with, like, God symbolism. They talk about God, like, actually, again, at the very beginning of the book, or the short story, they say that not only were people equal in the eyes of the law and God, but also X, Y, and Z. So there's this interesting seed planted about not necessarily like, well, God exists and God X, Y, and Z, but in consistency with the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence, the ideal form of equality is equality before the law. Anything after that is unnecessary. And for Harrison Bergeron to come out and say, I am an emperor, which I had forgotten that he said that. And when I read it, I was shocked, kind of like, whoa, you think this guy's going to be this egalitarian, like, and, you know, we're going to set up communes and we're going to distribute wealth and we're going to make sure X, Y, and Z. But I think the way I'm choosing to interpret this, which is like the most Ayn Randian possible way, which most of the time ends up being like the most fun kind of way to interpret things, it's him being like, I'm going to be the emperor of my own life. I'm going to be I'm going to define my own destiny. That's what he's saying by saying I'm the emperor. But I mean, that's an interpretation of my own.
So I actually had that wrote down. This is like an Ayn Rand hero type deal. That he is he understands what his own greatness is and chooses to be tied down, and literally bound by society in this case.
Yeah,
like it's really missing of Ayn Rand in this story.
You could say very easily that him taking off the weights is like Atlas shrugging. Like if the symbolism is very similar, that they're bogging him down, and one of the strangest devices they use is they actually distort his vision. His vision's too good, so they put disorienting glasses on him, and all of it gets shrugged, like quite literally, like Atlas.
It was so not a really good, like, powerful imagery, powerful, like, all of it. It's just really, yeah, I can't recommend it enough to people. I'm gonna put a link for it. Let's see, I have anything else wrote down here. This must be the future where feminists took over, because they make everybody weigh about 300 pounds.
Well, and also the president, or the general handicapper, is a female, which is interesting.
I won't say that was an interesting point they made, that the president's the one who, spoiler warning, the president's the one who made the final shot.
Yeah.
It was weird to see a story where the president was actually on the ground in the situation. I wonder what
and also, not just on the ground, but also, like, had a double-barreled shotgun. Which is pretty absurd. That she just busts in. I can just imagine it in my head, like some kind of Looney Tunes scene where the door, like, blows down and the president's standing there with this shotgun, and just it's like quite a tangible authoritarian figure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that's about all I wanted to go over. You got anything else you want to
add? Two things just really quickly. We talked earlier about the role of nature, and how it's contrasted, and also how nature in the short story is symbolic of really kind of defiance. The short story starts with Hazel crying, and she doesn't know why, and that's actually how it ends, is that she's crying. So it's like tears are a natural part of existence, and they occur naturally, and nothing they can do will stop her from crying. The only thing they can really do to debilitate that is prevent her from remembering or understanding why she's crying. So there is just a sense of like human spirit enduring through all of the automation, which I think is part of what makes like the symbols and the themes of this short story so enduring. Also, I feel like this could be like its own thing, but I'll just say it really quickly. I'm reading through The Constitution of Liberty by Frederick Hayek, and he talks, the first 200 pages are just all about liberty and coercion, and like, it's interesting. If you read the book and you're an ANCAP or something, I think that you would get turned off by like the first 10 pages, because he essentially says, well, we can't eliminate all coercion, so we might as well limit it to its most fundamental and essential level, which I think is just foundationally different from any ANCAP I've ever met. Which
it really is.
Yeah, but
really is.
But he goes on to say if you can get past that, and he has some interesting stuff about the role of coercion, and like really, I'm going to add my own thoughts to this and kind of build off of what his argument was. But a part of freedom and a part of liberty and responsibility associated with that is just failure and bottoming out. I know, like in North Korea, it's illegal to be homeless. They will put you in prison. But in America, we have like a rampant homelessness problem. But I think that problem is actually demonstrative of our liberty, because we're allowed to fail and we're allowed to just, pull out of society. And in Harrison Bergeron, people are so coerced and so controlled and so planned that I don't think that you'd be allowed to just be homeless or be completely just take your life into your own hands and say I'm retreating from civilization. I don't think that would be allowed. So it's kind of an odd, counterintuitive, awful argument, but like sometimes your life failing and not succeeding is essential to freedom, and it's actually, when you compare it to somewhere like North Korea or the United States of Harrison Bergeron, not even the worst possible scenario.
No, that's a good point. Freedom to fail is a very big part of freedom itself.
Yeah, and then taking responsibility for the failure too.
That's a good point. One more question then. No, actually not. 3 more questions. One, do you recommend any book? What book would you recommend people read?
So if we're staying in the strain of like liberty or kind of like more weighty philosophical books that make you think, I would say The Gladiators by Arthur Koestler. He's known most predominantly for writing Darkness at Noon, which is an incredible book. I would argue it's much better than Gladiators. But I think if the target audience of this podcast or anyone that's listening is an ANCAP, I think it is a really interesting and challenging book for that particular political philosophy for a couple of reasons. I'm not going to go into that, but it was super interesting, super challenging for me, and it made me think a lot about my like notions as someone that's like ANCAP, libertarian. That it was really really well written. It's about the Spartacus rebellions that took place right before, or Spartacus rebellions right before Jesus was born. So it's like historical fiction. And then my personal favorite book, which I recommend to everyone, which is really short, it's like 90 pages. It's called Jesus' Son by Dennis Johnson. That book is incredible.
Okay. Second question. Favorite economist? We brought up Milton Friedman, brought up Hayek, so now I'm curious. Favorite economist?
Okay. So I'm gonna completely discredit everything I've said so far. I've never actually read anything by Murray Rothbard, and
Really?
from what I can tell, based on Twitter interactions alone, he's very compelling.
Yes.
So I am actually like Anatomy of the State is like on my bookshelf, and it's going to be read soon. I will say I would not be who I am today in any way without Milton Friedman. So he holds like a really special place in my heart. Because when I was like 15, I started watching John Stossel on Fox Business, and I was like, oh wow, this is way more compelling than like being a neocon. And so I started watching him and reading him, and then I got into Thomas Sowell. And more recently, like maybe a year ago, I started reading Hayek. And I would say Hayek is probably my favorite economist, just because I think there's a level of realism and compassion in his diagnosis of like what's wrong with socialism or what's wrong with Keynesianism or centrally planned economies that I think is an outlier in the field of like libertarianism, considering it is a philosophy dominated by someone like Ayn Rand, who I've read The Virtue of Selfishness, and it's like I appreciate Hayek's attention to the human suffering and his prescription for human suffering makes sense to me a lot. So I would say Hayek.
I agree with that. When I read of Hayek, he's much less of a, how do I put this? I think Rothbard is much more of a idealist. He proposed a system of an actual like ANCAP type system. But Hayek seemed much more like this is what's actually happening now, much more of a realist. Like, no, we can't get rid of all forms of coercion. You know, we have to have courts or something. So I think he's much more of a realist, which I think really is useful to read. You know, like it's fun to read Rothbard, but really Hayek is much more helpful, I think.
Yeah, which I was really drawn to that when I read it, because I was saying earlier about how I don't really enjoy getting into beefs on Twitter or anything. It's like seeing an economist that is part of such. I mean, if you look at memes about like the political compass, the libertarian right is always like this brutal, just like no heart, you know, let them eat cake kind of attitude, and I think Hayek really challenges that, which I appreciate.
Absolutely. When you read Rothbard's Anatomy of the State, let me know, because I'd love to have you on talk about that. It's one of my favorite books. It's the most influential book I've ever read.
Yeah, I might be on here with a Rothbard T-shirt and Rothbard hat, and I'll be like, hi, after I read it.
I made a T-shirt a while ago that says "Democracy is friends," and on the back it says "Read some Rothbard." And so I'm a bit of a Rothbard fanboy, yes.
Okay, awesome.
So, let me ask you last question. Where can people find you on Twitter if they want to follow you, see more of your inspiring weight loss journey, and other cool takes and posts you make?
Yeah, so my Twitter is Grayson Wayne 95, which I had to look up. I completely forgot what my handle was. That's if I'm mumbling or if that wasn't clear, it's Grayson, which is the first Robin. I'm a big Batman fan. It's Robin. His name's Dick Grayson.
Oh
So it's
yeah.
Grayson, and then it's Batman's last name, Bruce Wayne. So it's Wayne. So Grayson Wayne, and then I was born in 95. So 95.
So now I gotta ask. Now you brought up Batman. So actually now I have to ask. Dick Grayson your favorite Robin, or you can go a different one?
Well, so actually, it's funny. I think Dick Grayson's my favorite Batman. I don't know if you've read any of the 2011. Back in like 2011, the DC Comics did this Batman RIP story arc where they killed Batman.
Very good.
And I mean, it was like Dick Grayson was born in like 1939, and his whole arc is like becoming Batman essentially. And it finally was realized, and I really love all of those. There's a really great series called Streets of Gotham, which is not even really about him, but it's during that period. But my favorite Robin is actually Tim Drake, who does not get any love in any kind of media.
Same here. Same here. Tim Drake is the best Robin. He figured out Batman's identity without watching TV. You know,
yeah,
he's awesome.
People, I mean, if someone just watched like the big screen movies and even like the DC animated stuff, they would be like, Tim who? Are you talking about Jason or Damian? It's like, no, Tim's the best Robin. He has a bow staff. He's awesome. Everyone should love Tim Drake. That's walk away from this Harrison Bergeron podcast knowing that Tim Drake's the best Robin.
Oh yeah, and also if you listen to this podcast, you might as well go read that Batman story. Nightwing being Batman has some amazing moments. Like he's talking to Alfred. One scene, my favorite one, he's talking to Alfred about being Batman. He's like, I hate the cape. First thing I got right up was the cape. I can't my balance. It's a really good story.
He doesn't like how it throws off his weight. That's why Nightwing didn't have a cape.
Oh yeah, it's a really if you like Batman lore, Nightwing becoming Batman with Damian Wayne not really respected him, and the whole story there, very good. Probably best Batman story I'd say the past 10 years, maybe. No, when it come out?
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay. Well, this has been a lot of fun. I hope to have everyone again talk about Rossbard. Or really, if they do want to come on, just send me a book. I'll go through it, and we'll come on anytime you want. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, man. I was in a graduate program for literature, and for a couple reasons, I'm not in it this semester. So I've been reading more than I ever have in my life, and talking about it less than I ever have in my life. So this was a lot of fun to come on and kind of scratch that itch.
Glad I can help. Well, this has been the Libertarian Book Club. I hope everyone had a good time, and remember, go read Harrison Bergeron. It's really good. Goodbye, everybody.